Steve apologizes. He's unable to join us this morning. And the title is something that I personally can't get away from. I am unable in this difficult period of war and reassessing who's on the right of any particular situation. Has me constantly connecting whatever we do in class to the news, to what's happening in the world now. It's nothing new. Everybody who's in this group knows this by now. We dedicate our study to elevating our souls above the difficulties of loss and destruction and evil and fighting evil in the world, but also elevating our souls in that ongoing struggle we have with ourselves to try to figure out, so what exactly is good and what is bad on any given issue. And trying to perhaps use scripture to help us clarify some of those issues for ourselves. And hence the title today, From Prophecy to Reality with a question mark. And as I often do, I will share with you something from my own past and how this text played a part in the world that I lived in. And I invite everybody to always do that. I don't always pause to ask that question. If someone knows a text from what we're doing, it's not that well known. Second Isaiah, it's not the same as the texts that are constantly in our liturgy, although these texts are in our liturgy, but not on a daily basis. Psalms are in the Jewish liturgy on a daily basis, a weekly basis, and some stories are more studied and some laws are more studied than others if one grows up in a Jewish education. But I welcome those who've grown up in different educations to share also if a particular passage presents itself with a memory of who you were and what you thought and how that text influenced you. That's why we're doing this together. That's very much part of why we take the time to study people of different faith backgrounds, faith together. Were there any comments or questions about last week or the weeks before that somebody would like to start with before we begin our passages today? Okay, then. So, Wayne, you want to start us off with verses 1 to 3?
Sure. Listen to me, you who pursue justice, you who seek God. Look to the rock you were hewn from, to the quarry you were dug from. Look back to Abraham, your father, and to Sarah, who brought you forth. For he was the only one when I called him. But I blessed him and made him many. Truly God has comforted Zion, comforted all her ruins, made her wilderness like Eden, her desert like the garden of God. Gladness and joy shall abide there, thanksgiving and the sound of music.
Okay. Thoughts? Is this a text that's familiar to anybody from earlier in life?
It's not familiar to me, but I like the idea that we were hewn from rock as opposed to being drawn out from the mud or something. So
It's tougher, it's stronger, huh?
yeah,
Less slimy.
Yeah.
Do women feel the same way?
Makes us more sturdy.
Rabbi, I certainly remember it from the early year. I was born in 46, so
but let's
Go
not
ahead.
keep printing it out and getting ready as if we're going to do it. Okay.
No.
I was just saying that I would just remember. It may not be the specific verse, but verses like it for the early years of Israel.
January 25th.
Yeah, sorry, we've got somebody
this is
who's
not
unmuted. We've got some noise in the background. If you could help me out here. Thanks. Go ahead. So once again, sorry, if you could repeat that.
Yeah, I was saying I don't know if it was this verse specifically, but it certainly sounds like the verses from that were spoken about at synagogue and Hebrew school during the early years of the state of Israel. I mean, like I was growing up in the 50s. So, it was, it just sounds like, and then they would show films of, kibbutzniks.
Right, dancing in the dining room after the meals.
Exactly. And wearing shorts. I remember they always everyone was wearing short pants, and it always looked very hot. And I was on Long Island where it was very cold. So
Yeah.
I always remember saying, why can't we go to Israel where it's warm?
I'll get to you in just a second, Terry, but the quintessential poster from when many of us grew up going to Hebrew school, not just on Sundays, but say Sundays, Mondays, and Wednesdays, or Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday, 6 hours of Jewish education, which was pretty solid, gave me personally a very solid background in Hebrew language. So when I got to Israel when I was 15, I was able to quickly learn how to speak. But there was indoctrination going on as well, and I don't say this in a negative way. It was part of the educational process towards Zionism, and there were always posters from, at least in my synagogue, there were always posters from the Israel Ministry of Tourism that were on the walls, and the quintessential poster would be a big size poster with cracked mud, cracked earth, and a flower coming up through one of the cracks. Make the desert bloom, those kinds of things. And many of us grew up on that mythology. Again, I don't say mythology in a negative sense necessarily, although it can be, but we grew up on that myth of the Jews, in this case, from Eastern Europe, but from different places, came from all over the world. Exiles were gathered, the ingathering of the exiles in this land that was not talked about in secular circles as intrinsically holy, but a land that would, first of all, save the Jewish people from further destruction, but also a land where the people could make it bloom because it was a desert. It was all a desert. People will talk to me, they'll say, but in Tel Aviv, you surely didn't have this because it was a desert. Tel Aviv's not a desert. There are some desert regions in the land of Israel, but the northern part of Israel is very much not a desert. But this idea that the Jews are coming to make the desert bloom, as if there was nobody else there as well. That's the subtext of this is not mentioned, but we'll get back to that, of course. Terry, what would you like to say?
Just that I appreciate a positive note here. I love this, to make the wilderness like Eden, her desert like the garden of God, and gladness and joy and thanksgiving and music. I mean, we've read so many passages of gloom and doom that just to read something more uplifting is really wonderful.
That's great. That's a really important point. The positivity in this passage and our lack sometimes in our daily dosages of social media and regular media of positivity. I happen to look through, as I often do, as I'm just getting up in the morning, just kind of scroll through. If I get stuck on Facebook or Instagram, one of them where it's reels, and then you get this random TV stuff, So one of them was a TV story about a woman who was a 38 years as a kindergarten teacher somewhere in Indiana, I think. And she's sitting outside and she's clapping the graduates who were walking by from the local high school. She's applauding them until she realizes they're coming into her yard to thank her because she had retired 12 years ago, and they wanted to thank her and hug her for the education. It was a lovely, lovely story. Saying, dude, damn, thank you for that, right? We like when that happens, as schmaltzy as it is, right? But we want to be encouraged by things. But here's the catch, Terry. This is my challenge, is that the people, the usage of this, and this is in my own teenhood and early adulthood, the usage of this was, this is a theme song for us. As we Israelis in the 1970s, late 70s, we continue to struggle to establish our state from a political point of view, from an economical point of view, from a social point of view. And we're doing this so that this desolate land will continue to bloom like a garden. The subtext there is that it wasn't a garden beforehand. And this is like the early Americans in moving westward and feeling that everything needs to be conquered, not just the human beings living there, but all the resources and everything. What's good is what's developed is good. Hillsides that don't have tract housing, those are desolate hillsides. We don't think that way anymore. I don't think many of us do, right? Now we struggle to preserve hill country in Texas. We're annoyed that so many people have retired in hill country, Texas, because they built up all the places that used to be rolling hills. Right, and likewise, the same thing wherever it is. So that's kind of that's the tension that I want to lift up here. Don, you must have something to say here.
Yeah, I think the idea of pursuing justice as a group of people to whom this is being addressed is interesting. But I also think that the names and the situations that are mentioned, Abraham, Sarah, the rock, the comfort of Eden, the garden of God, all of those things are like anchors for anyone looking back or hearing these words. It's very easy to recollect what that faith meant to people hearing these words.
Is it easy for you?
Well, I'm a newbie. I am new at this. I like the comforting words. I always like comforting words in scripture. I don't often always know what they mean, or the context of them, but they comfort me personally and spiritually. They comfort.
Well, thank you. Steve, you mentioned before, Steve Skopats, you mentioned before, like you like the idea we're hewn from rock, as opposed from slimy, kind of, amoebae. That story of that you like this evolutionary story better. So here's something interesting about this passage, which it has the option, it has the possibility of being, and is used, maybe not directly, but certainly indirectly, is used as a call to unity amongst those who are known as Abrahamic faiths, right? Jews, Muslims, and Christian Muslims, because we all go back according to the stories we tell ourselves. I'm not talking about history or genes right now, or DNA, but we all go back to Abraham and Sarah. And yes, it's lovely that it's not just Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in this case. It's Abraham and Sarah. It's also lovely that it's not specific to the people of Israel. Or it's very specific to it's those of Abraham, and we all are made from that same material. There's a call to unity here, a potential call to unity. Yet this passage is a major passage in Orthodox religious Zionism in Israel, which we call Messianic Zionism. Messianic Zionism is not using the term Messianic connected to Jesus, as when we talk about Messianic Jews, who are Jews who accept Jesus as Messiah and other things, but are very much Jewish in their own self-identity. That's one usage of the word Messianic. This is Messianism in Zionism, which was not the impetus, it was the foundation for Zionism. This idea that throughout the centuries that the Jews, the people of Israel, will go back to that land of Israel when the Mashiach, when the Messiah, somebody, a Scion from the house of David, will rise up and lead them into battle, and God, there will be miracles. That is very much Jewish, and that upon that vision, that prophetic vision, Christianity is built, went in a different direction, of course, but that Jewish messianism is in the background of all Jewish literature until modern times. And then in the hands of secular, especially Theodor Herzl, and other secular Jews in the late 19th century, it became divided or disconnected from the theological aspects, but made into a call for independence, for for national, for destiny, for safety. All those things came together. And the initial reaction of Orthodox Jews was to reject it. I think many of you know that, because this was not the way. You're supposed to wait for God to do this with the Messiah. But there soon began to be a certain small group of religious Zionists. And by the first, by the founding of the State of Israel, there were a greater group, and many of them moved to Israel. Many of them, especially after the Shoah, Many of them came from Hasidic families, but no longer were Hasidic, but still were Orthodox. And there was a connection to this seeing the land of Israel in a very different, in a mystical way. And so their Messianic Zionism, had to do with the state of Israel is the first step of bringing the Mashiach. Instead of waiting for the Mashiach to come, the establishment of the state of Israel with a police force, with the army, with taxes, with everything that comes to a modern state, that was the first step, the beginning of the flowering of the redemption. This is in a nutshell what religious Orthodox Zionism is. And one of the major texts, and I was part of that world, and when I moved to Israel in the 1970s, this section from Isaiah is one of those major texts. But of course, nobody talks about Abraham and Sarah as being the ancestors of everybody. It's just the ancestors of the Jews. That part has been kind of cut off from its potential as being more universalistic. And the latter part was a song that we danced to many, many times. Many times. It was a theme song. It was the song that we marched to in the army. I was in an Orthodox unit in the army of yeshiva boys. We marched to this music. We marched while we sang these songs. And we literally thought that's what we were doing. We were creating this land of Israel, and which may have non-Jews in it, but they certainly don't play a major part. And I say all this because that's in the background of much of what you're reading about today in the news. When you see that there are in the polls, there's a small, a minority, but a growing minority of Israelis that want to go back and resettle Gaza. When you see there are relatives of people who are who have loved ones and relatives who are hostages, and still they oppose any kind of humanitarian aid because they feel that the only way to get there, that if we give in anything to the terrorists, to Hamas, we're losing. That's in the background of all this stuff. This pathos of knowing that what we're doing is the fulfillment of what they're doing, is the fulfillment of the words of Isaiah. Okay, I think, Don, you want to respond? Perhaps there's other people.
The other thing that you talk about, the mystical element of it, when you look at Abraham and Sarah, you see the potential for new generations, the potential for new birth, not only for individuals, but for a whole country. But that also could be applicable to non-Jews as well. That as people of the book, that we see this richness that has come forth from the roots of this tree of Judaism.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, that is the potential that I spoke of. It could be seen like that, and should be. You and I think we would agree on that. So then I go back to what you said, Terry. Is do we think that every undeveloped area being developed into to turn a desert into a garden of God? I don't think. I mean, I would imagine you live in the desert half the time. I imagine that's not exactly the words you would use today, correct? Yeah. I mean, I think we've come to learn that there's a beauty in the pristine state of different parts of this earth. You know. Okay. Sermon is over. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Frank, you want to do a 4-6 for us, please?
Hearken to me, my people, and give ear to me, O my nation, for the teaching shall go forth from me. My way for the light of peoples, in a moment I will bring it. The triumph I grant is near, the success I give has gone forth. My arm shall provide for the peoples, the coastlands shall trust in me, they shall look to my arm. Raise your eyes to the heavens, and look upon the earth beneath. Though the heavens should melt away like smoke, and the earth wear out like a garment, and all its inhabitants die out as well, my victory shall stand forever. My triumph shall remain unbroken.
Reactions?
Carrie.
Seems to be a real call to paying attention. Even at the start, the listen, the look back, the hearken, the give ear, raise your eyes. I get a sense of look all around you at what is happening, and don't lose hope, because I think that's in there too. Is the triumph I grant is near, the success I give has gone forth. So it's, in spite of whatever else is going on, if you pay attention and look at all of these things, he's still working in the midst of all of this. He hasn't abandoned them.
And if you take the second half of the second column, not only is God still at work, still in the midst, but God will continue to be working at this long after you are gone, right?
Yeah.
Right. Even though this world, this universe disintegrates in a future explosion, God will still be there doing whatever God does, which could be seen by some as not being too much of a comfort, but the way you presented it very much could. That is the comfort. If God is saying this now through the prophet to the people, if this is the truth that God is saying, then hold on to that truth as something that is an enduring truth. And to me, the plus here is that, and it's not about you. It's not about you per se, Lazar, being saved. This is about truth and justice, as was brought up beforehand. Perhaps, I don't know. Rita Claire, did you want to say something?
Yes, I was just thinking how much we take for granted of looking up at the sky and the stars and the moon and the sun and the earth. We take it all for granted, and especially where we've come to realize that we do have to protect both. Otherwise, it will disappear.
And I understand protecting the earth. How do we protect the heavens?
Well, a lot has to do with the pollution that we put into the air that we breathe, and we see all the progress that we have made over the years, and it comes with a price.
All the flotsam and jetsam that is floating around in our
Satellites,
orbiting. Thank you, orbiting around the Earth. Or I think of the series For All Mankind. I don't know if any of you have watched that on Apple TV. This just going up and just leaving stuff on the moon and on Mars and thinking that it belongs to us. I think of certain individuals in the world economy that certainly believe that the space belongs to us. Yeah. So, yeah. But the other side of that, Rita Claire, for me is to remember the care, but also to be in awe of,
definitely,
and be awe of the way it is, which is why in our evening prayers, Friday evening prayers, we take the time actually to dwell on that a bit. Yeah.
Just like the sunrise this morning, I don't know if anybody saw it, but the sky was aflame.
Wonderful. One has to get up that early though to see the sunrise.
Yes.
That's the challenge there. Just
Yeah.
Dawn, before Dawn, anybody else want to give a comment? Yeah, Harold, was that you? No. Oh, Mirta, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I really liked the second part of it when he says, raise your eyes to the heavens, and it kind of is opposed to and its inhabitants die out as well. So to me, it's like focusing on heaven, that whatever happens on the physical, there is something much bigger that will stay there forever. So the spiritual, the internal.
Lovely idea. Metaphorical.
Thanks.
Well, that's great. Dawn, what did you want to?
I wanted to say that the idea of it not being all about collective me is so opposed to the way that we are brought up in society where we think about me, collective me, first and foremost. How we see that in civility breaking down, how we get offended by even the slightest criticism or lack of affirmation. And we don't think of it not being all about me. And maybe we need more of that to help us become where we really belong and the place of this, all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. The contribution of good religion to our lives as opposed to not so good religion. Yeah. The things that come up in my visits around other places of worship, and two in particular, and there's a certain I guess disappointment in churches in Palm Springs that are in a predominantly African American neighborhood that I attended for a few months before the pandemic, in which I was expecting, or I was hoping, I guess I shouldn't have been expecting, I was hoping to hear more of the kind of rhetoric in sermons that I've seen on the news, that Martin Luther King, that kind of Warnick, that kind of stuff. And what I heard was far more about sin and Satan and personal things. I'm not discounting those things per se. I know Satan is a huge package to undo, to unpack, but it was focused on the personal and totally on the other end of that, not other end, but a different end, a different corner of local religion, extremely successful. And by the way, full church, wonderful pastor with very charismatic, good music, a totally different experience I don't know what there must be it's a denomination probably, but I don't know the name of it. It's the Church for Spirituality. Help me out, guys. There's one in Palm Desert. There's one not far from you, Rita Claire. It's there's a lot of meditation in the service. For the Church of Spiritual Direction, something. The word spiritual is in there, and also lovely music. The one in Palm Desert, lovely music, packed, hundreds of people, and long, good, silent meditation during it. Things that I'm interested in doing, and then the talk. Nothing ever about homelessness or pollution or whatever. It's all about personal kind of achievement thing. Now, I'm not discounting that per se. There's a place for all these things, but it didn't feel like it was a call to greater responsibility outside the world. So a lot of religion takes us to that place of meanness, right? It's not, religion can do that as well. Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Yes, Stephen.
I just took this more as a warning, or just thinking at the time this was written, to think that the earth could wear out. I didn't think there were people thinking of that 2,000 or more years ago, and that all the inhabitants could die. It seems to me more of our current dystopian literature and stuff that's been very prominent in the last 50 years, as opposed to thinking back that Isaiah had this thought, millennia ago.
So I think the dystopian aspect is human created, right? Is that when we think of it, that's what we've done to ourselves. Whereas I think, to me, the message here is that long after you're gone, having nothing to do with you, you are immaterial here, you mere human being, and the earth goes back to being to a different form than it was when God came and created it in Genesis chapter 1. Then in other words, it's, to me, that I don't know if dystopia is the right term for that. I don't know enough about English, but I don't think, in other words, so what I'm not surprised about is if you truly believe that God created the world from the unformed and void, from tohu vavohu,
Mhm.
then if you truly believe that, well, there is an existence of God which has nothing to do with human beings and this world. So this world could fade away. What I find the insight in this section, for me, the insight is, I hear you here saying we're used to scientific insights being something modern, but it's not so much a scientific insight, but it's an insight. Well, I see, says the prophet or the person, I see how trees lose their leaves and wither. I see how a tree dies. I see how people die. I see how canyons crumble through erosion. I see the way of the world. There's a sense of that. Perhaps anyway, I absolutely hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. Just don't think it's human induced here.
Mhm.
It's not the result of a world war. Yeah.
No, not at that point. Yeah.
Which is also a great lesson for us, isn't it? We think that we're so special as human beings. Only we can destroy the world. The world can destroy without us as well.
Yeah.
I think we don't have a sense of awe. I mean, you know, and these are only thoughts, but you know, what would you do if you're sitting in your chair reading a book and an angel appeared to you, or something strange happened? I mean, where knocked you off your pins. I think we need some of that in our lives. Weird thoughts, but
No. You'd be a wonderful student of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel of blessed memory. That was kind of his plea to his students. You need a sense of awe. Have you ever read the book The Sabbath?
no.
Heschel. So this is I don't often see, well, I do every few times I suggest a book. I suggest, for those that have not had the pleasure of reading it, Abraham Joshua Heschel, The Sabbath. I'll put it in the chat box. I'm wondering if Steve Kinney met Heschel. I don't know if he was there at the same time. He may have been after Heschel died at JTS. Interesting character in Jewish history. Grew up in a Hasidic home, but not Eastern European as much as a Hasidic home that. At some point in his life, he was in Austria. Was able to get out of Europe with the help of the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati before it was too late, and he taught there for a while, and then he migrated to the Jewish Theological Seminary. That is, from the Reform Rabbinical Seminary to the Conservative Movement Seminary. Conservative, for those that are not familiar, is a bit of a misnomer. I'm a conservative rabbi, and I'm anything but. See, it just happens to be the name of the denomination. That's for another day, how it got that way. And Heschel was the teacher of those that are my teacher. The teacher, me, in the conservative movement, they are Heschel's teachers. Rabbi Art Green and Ray Artst and blanking on David Zissenwein. They're those that were my teachers, as opposed to others who were followed some other very, very prominent rabbinic figures at the seminary. Heschel was very much in the media at the time. He marched with Martin Luther King. You may know there's a famous pictures of him with King marching in Selma. Got involved in the anti-war movement, was on TV. And so he knew how to do that. He knew how to straddle the world of academia, but a super serious scholar when it came to Hasidic literature. We've actually talked, now that I'm saying, we've spoken about Heschel many times, because Steve Kinney is very influenced by his book called The Prophets, which I've always had a hard time reading. I've never finished it. It's a very complex book. May go back to it now. Figure if Kinney, the Anglican priest, can read it, I can read it, the Jewish rabbi. But anyway, Heschel's most accessible work is a slim volume called The Sabbath. Loomis, were you with us when we did that with Pastor Jane? Pastor Jane and I, we taught it together a few years ago. We did a book group, but it could have been in the summer. Yeah, it could have been. Anyway, it's a slim volume. Why am I saying this? Part of his message, writing it in the 50s, was to say and he's writing to Jews, ostensibly to Jews, but really to everybody. you guys are, everybody's so swept up with your work, with your careers. Got to take that time to create a palace in time, not a palace in space, but a palace in time for those 25 hours of Shabbat from right before sundown to the stars come out Saturday on Friday and to the stars come out Saturday night, to be in awe of the world. In awe of the world is not just walking in nature. Certainly, those are great shortcuts. It's not just seeing a baby being born, but it's also looking at your grandchildren, your children, taking the time to look and to listen, to be with your lover, to look in the eyes, to be with other people, to read, to appreciate, instead of being swept up with the need to get by, to make a living. So that and his great call to his students was to have a sense of what's the word he used? I can't remember. There's a 2-word phrase that he used all the time. I'm blanking on it right now. In any case, you would be a great so if you can get a hold of that book, but you can buy it's not an expensive book at all. You could probably find it for a buck or two in a used bookstore even. Yeah, it's a slim volume. Really, really recommended. Okay, something tells me now that I've said this, it's not the first time. Yes, Frank.
I just wanted to mention, I know a number of Protestant ministers, Episcopal, Presbyterian, over the years that have said that was one of the most valuable books they ever read in terms of spiritual sense of things.
Yeah. Oh, the term I was trying to remember that he uses, radical amazement. Radical amazement. Yeah, great. Thank you, Frank. Yeah. So interesting. I mean, these are just really 2 wonderful passages we've read now with a lot of, but why don't we go on to see where else we go with this? Terry, you want to read for us 7 to 8?
Listen to me, you who care for the right, O people who lay my instruction to heart. Fear not mortals' insults, and be not dismayed at their jeers. For the moth shall eat them up like a garment, the worm shall eat them up like wool. But my triumph shall endure forever, my salvation through all the ages. It's getting a little less positive.
Well, in what way?
Well, we go back to that. Well, I guess maybe, if it's the enemies who are being consumed, eaten up like by worms and all of that. But again, the reiteration of God's triumph shall endure forever. When it says salvation, what does salvation mean? And I read it all the time in the Psalms and stuff, but what does it mean here when you talk about salvation?
So salvation, in order to understand any term, it's important to context, right? Obviously, and that's what you're asking. What's the context here? Salvation means the bare bones of salvation is a bad situation becoming good. That would say, to me, that's the bare bones of salvation, right? If I look in this context, what I want to do is to look at the parallelism of the poetics of the Hebrew text here. So if well, I'm going to do it in Hebrew and then we'll go back to the comparison. V'tzitkati leolam tiyeh. So here it says my triumph. Another translation will be my justice. My justice will always be, and my salvation throughout the ages. So here the paralleled word, the synonymous parallel is with the root tzedek, which means right, correct, just. So here I would say salvation means bringing about justice in the world. In the overall context of 2nd Isaiah, it is you were a people who were exiled from your land, justly so, by the way, because you guys messed up. But now, to bring it back to the right way, is that another nation shall not dominate another nation. It's the Exodus from Egypt over again, right? So therefore, now what is the context of this particular verse? Is the parable let's call it the parable of the moth. Well, what does it mean when a moth or a worm destroys a garment? What is that actually saying? Well, how do you feel? when you kept back to Palm Springs after being wherever you are in the Midwest, I guess, or wherever you live in, when you're not in paradise, and you come back and you see that you've got a hole in your sweater.
Well, actually, I did have that happen, but it was in a chair. And it had been stored in a closet. It was a folding chair that had upholstery on it. And some moth got into the closet and chewed a hole. Now, they didn't eat the chair. See, that's the thing, you know, this talks about they'll eat them up like, well, it wasn't destroyed, but I was really ticked at that moth for chewing up the chair, and then to try and fix it was difficult.
And now you have something to blame, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Imagine forgot to put cedar in your closet.
Well, or something to prevent.
Or
the
those things that all the things in my grandmother's closet
Yes.
smell, right? Whatever. That
Yeah.
stuff. Okay, so
Blaming.
there's there's a place for us to focus our anger, our frustration, right? But also, it's something that just seems so wasteful. How many hours went into weaving that cloth, making the string, whatever, all the different things, harvesting the cotton or the wool, whatever it is to go into, and then boom, and why you ask it feels like it's evil, doesn't it? It's kind of like mosquitoes. Don't mosquitoes seem evil, really? Or a fly that's in a restaurant, otherwise beautiful restaurant, that just won't leave your table alone. There's evil in there, isn't it? Right? So we use these kind of metaphors. So what it means here, I think, is that yes, there are things that are getting in the way, that are making holes. Don't treat them so seriously. And now it's back to the larger context of this paragraph. The social circle, the people that are giving you grief, that are saying, "Oh, you dirty Jew," or "You naive Christian," or wherever you are, the kind of things that's in the first column, right? Fear not mortals' insults. Why? Because I have given you the instruction. I've given you the right way. Lest you say, "Yes, but I went the right way and I got holes in my clothes," right? And I got rotten tomatoes thrown at me, or I was worse, I was swatted, or I was, whatever the thing that might be. I was whatever you do on social media to people you don't like. All those kind of things, because in the end, okay, it's a hole in your sweater. In the end, though, it'll come out. In the end, just you let it go, weather the storm. In the end, it'll come out. And that's based on the previous paragraph as well, because if you really believe that the message is from God, Adonai Elohei Yisrael, the one who created Shamayim va'aretz, the heavens and the earth, then you put things in a different perspective. That's what this says to me. I don't know if that jives with you. Don, you probably have a different reading.
No, I like that. Sometimes I have a hard time feeling that God enters the world into human affairs. But I do what you say. I try to put that aside and still believe that God is in control. Whatever whatever is happening, that there's a divine purpose, and maybe that's my faith speaking. I don't know. But I know another thing. It keeps me more positive than negative. It keeps me feeling like, it's all going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that doesn't mean that I have to stop doing what I believe in or saying what I believe in, but I still give the control over.
Good. So I want to draw everybody's attention to Wayne's comment in the chat box about documentary on PBS, I guess, or I said public television. I guess that's PBS, right? Whatever to look for. I'm sure if you Google the Spiritual Audacity, which is the name of a collection of his articles that his daughter Susanna Heschel, prominent scholar on her own, who's at Dartmouth, and her book, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this before. I know we have, at least last year when we were doing Acts. She wrote a book on how the Nazis commandeered's not the right word, manipulated Jesus in Christianity around the time of before the Shoah. in certain churches, not all churches, but in many churches in Germany. Yeah, a disturbing distortion of I think of Chris. But anyway, she's a scholar of that kind of literature, German literature, or sociology and history. So in light of what you said, Don, and not getting too, so what do you do? What do we do about it? So Jim, why don't you read for us from 9 to 11, Awake, Awake.
Awake, awake, clothe yourself with splendor, O arm of the Eternal One. Awake as in days of old, as in former ages. It was you that hacked Rahab in pieces, that pierced the dragon. It was you that dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, that made the abysses of the sea a road the redeemed might walk. So let God's ransomed return and come with shouting to Zion, crowned with joy everlasting. Let them attain joy and gladness, while sorrow and sighing flee.
So what's this reference to Rahab being hacked in pieces and pierced the dragon?
yes.
Yeah, anybody know it?
Yeah, I peeked at this just before the class started, and it caught my attention too. So I did some checking around, and it's not the Rahab we know from Joshua. It's it's something entirely different, and it's mentioned without any exposition in elsewhere in Isaiah and in Job and in Psalms, and just in context, it's thought to be another name for Egypt.
Okay, so for the first comment is this is Rahab with a hey and not Rahav with a chet, who is Rahab the prostitute in Joshua. So although they may be spelled the same, especially since when I spell things in English, I use H for both chet and hey. So Rahab and the dragon here, these are actually well-known characters. They're where we hear about them, as Dan said, from Isaiah and from Job and from Psalms, some Psalms as well. These are prehistoric creatures that are prominent in ancient Near Eastern literature. These are the ancient bad guys, just like you have Leviathan in one of the Psalms, that perhaps you know, or the great Taninim, sea monsters in the Genesis 1 story of creation. There are Sridim, remnants of this ancient literature, ancient culture that are in our Hebrew Bible as well. And they are thought to, they are often used as, well, they're nothing. They've been defeated by Adonai. The real one, they're not even gods. They're just big creatures, so to speak. They're not deities. They're perceived as deities to others. So then comes in who perceives them as deities and who might they symbolize. And so that's where you get, does this mean Egypt, or does that mean the dragon in particular is the Tanin? Does that mean, if you look at the last word in the first verse in Hebrew, Tanin, that's translated here as dragon, as the great, I'm sorry, this has been going on for decades. I cannot for the life of me remember which ones are in Florida and which ones are in Egypt, the crocodiles or the alligators.
Alligators are New World and crocodiles are Old World, I think.
But what's going to help me? You got to help me find something. This is ridiculous that I'm 66 and I cannot for the life. Yes, go ahead, Don. Give me.
Okay, so alligators, their teeth come out from the side. Crocodile, their mouth closes over their teeth, and alligators are found in Florida.
Yeah, but I need something that'll remind me of the geography, like a team. Isn't there a team or something called the Mississippi Alligators or something like that? Okay,
The Florida Gators. It's the Florida Gators.
Florida Gators.
Also, Florida is near Alabama, and alligators begins with A, and Alabama begins with A.
So I want to talk about crocodiles. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so the crocodiles there's a one chapter in Ezekiel in which and we've talked about this, I seem to remember, I think in this group in recent weeks, where Ezekiel prophesies against Pharaoh / the great Tanin, the great crocodile / the Nile River. It's all these things can converge into this one thing of which is perceived as false deity, right? And so that's why the connection, I think, with Egypt here. But what it means here, I don't think here, this is referring to geopolitics of the time. I think this is saying, in the same way that it said before, in the end, you're not going to be here. This world won't even exist, and yet God will persevere. It's saying, and you should know, we remember this is the God who was here long before you, before human beings came into the picture during this mythological battles of the gods, so to speak, which is known from other literature, which the people themselves who heard this, they knew about that other literature. They heard what was going on outside of their own homes and their own temple and their priests. And then it also, and here, that's why some people think this is Egypt, because of the reference here to the sea drying up. In other words, the God who does miracles, that's the God who is going to bring back. This is not a new idea. We've had it here. What's new here is the way that it's contexted together with what came beforehand. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what. So that would be an answer to your innocent question, Terry. Who are these people? Okay, anything else? Could you tell him to start? You should start in the dining room.
In the dining room?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, at my mother's house getting things done. Okay, 12:16. Who's up? Dan, why don't you read?
Okay, I'm coming.
Okay, Megan, 12:16.
12:16. I am the one who comforts you. What ails you that you fear who must die? Mortals who fare like grass. You have forgotten God your maker, who stretched out the skies and made firm the earth. And you live all day in constant dread because of the rage of the oppressor who is aiming to cut you down. Yet of what account is the rage of an oppressor? Quickly the crouching one is freed. He is not cut down and slain, and he shall not want for food. For I, the eternal your God, who stirs up the sea with roaring waves, whose name is God of hosts, have put words in your mouth and sheltered you with my hand. I, who planted the skies and made firm the earth, have said to Zion, you are my people.
So I'm going to, because I'd like to finish as I guess I've been speaking too much. We usually get these 2 pages done, but I just want to, this was part of the title of today as well. I feel, sorry, again, we're getting into contemporary politics. I feel too much, many Israelis, not all, many American Jews, not all, continue to go back to this kind of rhetoric. This is us. We're the ones who are the rage of the oppressor. We're the ones who have been victimized here. We're the ones we believe in God. God is going to see the destiny of the people of Israel, all this kind of stuff, without considering that there's another side to this, and that we may not be as pristine as we often present ourselves. And because when we look at the distance of 2,500 years back to these events that brought about this literature, 2,600 years, we see a people of Israel who were, their capital was destroyed by the Babylonians, were taken, at least the leadership, taken into captivity. We're unable to, manifest to have their own agency. And we see very, very clear the good guys and the bad guys. And when this kind of literature and this kind of is used to justify, as it is, to give hope to those who are suffering in Israel amongst relatively small amount of Israeli society, religious Zionists, Orthodox religious Zionists, that to me is something which is very challenging. Let's go on to the next 2 sections, and then we'll kind of wind it up. Dan Stork, you want to read 17 through the end?
Okay. Rouse yourself. Arise, O Jerusalem. You who from God's hand have drunk God's wrath-filled cup. You who have drained to the dregs the bowl, the cup of reeling. She has none to guide her of all the children she bore. None takes her by the hand of all the children she reared. These two things have befallen you, rack and ruin, who can console you? Famine and sword, how shall I comfort you? Your sons lie in a swoon at the corner of every street, like an antelope caught in a net, drunk with the wrath of God, with the rebuke of your God. Therefore, listen to this, unhappy one, who are drunk, but not with wine.
Go ahead, read the next section, please.
Thus said God, your sovereign, your God who champions this people. Herewith I take from your hand the cup of reeling, the bowl, the cup of my wrath. You shall never drink it again. I will put it in the hands of your tormentors who have commanded you. Get down that we will walk over you, so that you made your back like the ground, like a street for passers-by.
Okay. Hell of a way to end. I know that we like, but you'll see, by the way, in the Hebrew, this is the end of a section in the way that the scribes have recorded it. So part of our adventure and our perhaps frustration of reading Second Isaiah has been how unlinear it is, non-linear the text is. We seem to be getting somewhere where we feel good about, and boom, we're slapped down on the ground again. And some of the same imagery is used. One of you commented last week or the week before, you know, how humiliating to get down to be walked upon. But I would just end with us today, and sorry, I need to cut it short. We'll take just maybe 2-3 more comments, but is that when we say that we are being forced to lie down and walking over us, let us also examine our lives in their entirety. How might we be walking over others as well? And whether that's, yeah, okay. Any parting comments? Because I don't want people to think that I'm not allowing you to express yourselves, please. Oh, come on, now you make me feel guilty that I did.
But it's a good parting thoughts in that statement, Dave, Rabbi David.
All right. Okay, then we'll see everybody next week. Thank you for being here. My mother thanks you for allowing me to finish on time so I can meet with the people fixing the house. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.